if he'd have stopped recording then, if he'd been run over by a bus, we'd be saying now that Rod Stewart is a legend.
Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video, and tonight I am delighted to be joined by Mr. John Downing, 6-inch pianist 319. Good evening, John.
Yeah, good evening, James. Excellent.
Excellent, nice to be here with you. And we're doing a video this evening. This was John's idea. So I'm going to pass the book immediately on to John to introduce the concept, get us started, and then I will hopefully follow seamlessly in his slipstream.
We talked about doing a soul video, and I suggested making a video having a discussion about blue-eyed soul. So talking about white artists who made soul records, and this is something that's always fascinated me. So I'm going to start off by showing the first record, and probably the ultimate blue-eyed soul album, which is Dusty in Memphis. Now, Dusty Springfield, we all know, had an absolutely beautiful voice. You know, in 1968, 69, she went to Memphis and recorded this album with Jerry Wexler and Tom Dowd at Muscle Shoals Studio. For me, it's one of the best albums ever made. So that's the American copy. That's the UK copy. And I'm sure you've probably got a copy on CD or something there. Yeah, you got the LP there? Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. She had this career with Philips in the UK, and she made great pop hits, but she wanted to have more of a soul sound. So she had quite a long history with black artists. So she'd actually worked with the likes of Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, the Ronettes, the Supremes. She played shows with them in the earlier 60s. And when Motown got a bit of traction in the UK, much of that was down to Dusty initially, because she was a big fan of the Motown sound. And she actually headed up a TV program in the UK, Ready, Steady, Go, right, where basically it was a program just full of Motown acts, but presented by Dusty Springfield. And potentially that program wouldn't have been made had it not been for Dusty putting a name to it. Now, yeah. I'm not saying that, you know, Motown wouldn't have broke out in the UK without that. Clearly wouldn't. The songs were fantastic. The artists were wonderful, but she helped get it started, you know, so. Yeah.
And also I hear, this is a complete tangent, but she also got Led Zeppelin their record deal, didn't she? Did you hear about that?
Did she? Right.
Yeah, she did. Because she'd worked with John Paul Jones in some capacity, because he was a session man, of course, wasn't he? John Paul Jones was a session guy, and he basically told her that he got this new band, and she went and talked to the hunt shows at Atlantic, and so there's this great new British band, Led Zeppelin, and they signed Zeppelin purely on the strength of Dusty's recommendation without even having heard the band.
Fantastic. When I first heard this, I was a little bit, I'm not saying disappointed, but I was a little bit confused by it, because I expected it to be a straight soul album in the way of an Aretha Franklin record, something like that. And it's not. You've still got songs on here such as The Windmills of Your Mind, for example. Yeah. Which, you know, doesn't necessarily automatically fall into that sort of mold, but it just works perfectly, you know. So, but she, after making this record, I think Jerry Wexler started to pitch more song ideas to her to make it a follow-up, and she wasn't interested. I think she felt she needed to move on to another producer, and she ended up working with Gamble and Huff after this. Yeah, great record.
Okay, fantastic. Well, yeah, I mean, I've got a huge wad of records here. I'm not going to try and pretend to dovetail seamlessly. What I thought I would do, I mean, I've been spinning a few things today, so I'll kind of, you know, go through some stuff. But I thought I'd just like to rewind back to what I think possibly is my first encounter with what you might call blue-eyed soul. I mean, clearly back in the day, you know, back in my kid, no idea what it was or anything. But I sort of identified this record maybe.
Right, okay.
East Side Story by Squeeze, which came out in 1981. And of course, this was the album that featured their song Tempted, sung by Paul Carrack. And it had been recorded as a very sort of ploddy pop song, really. It was recorded originally by Dave Edmunds. He was the producer. They scrapped it. Paul Carrack joined the band. Costello came in to produce it, and he heard it, and immediately, for some reason, he heard it being done like the Temptations.
Right.
With all the falsetto vocals, and there's a bit of an R&B guitar thing in it. So he just came in, and of course you had Paul Carrack, who is, where is he? There. Now, he'd been in the band Ace, and they had what is sometimes referred to, I'm not sure if you've heard it referred to as a blue-eyed soul tune, but the song How Long.
Yeah.
Came out in about 1975. Now, it's quite interesting because what is blue-eyed soul and what is just pop music sung with a bit of a soul twist, you know? I mean, Paul Carrack, I think, is one of the great white British soul voices, really.
He is, definitely.
But
Definitely,
the stuff he does is it's kind of pop music, isn't it? It's not classic soul music, but his voice has got some sort of soul-like quality to it, which maybe places him in that kind of lineage of people like Steve Marriott, Stevie Winwood. I mean, he's maybe not kind of up there with them, Rod Stewart, some sort of indefinable quality of that kind of male white soul voice. And when you hear him doing Tempted, it's quite interesting because it was nothing like anything Squeeze had done before, because Squeeze were a British pop band. They did, you know, very English sounding songs. Tempted was a very American sounding record.
Yeah.
And I think it was their attempt to maybe cross over into the soul market, or at least the sort of pop soul market in the US, you know, using Paul Carrack.
Did it cross over in the US?
It became a big major radio hit, but it didn't actually become a big single or anything. But obviously Paul Carrack went on to have massive success later on with Michael and the Mechanics, and he's got a very good solo career now, you know. And so I just thought I would chuck that one into the mix, because I was thinking, I mean, when I first heard Tempted, I can distinctly remember as a kid, obviously not having any frames of reference or anything, but I'd come from, like, you know, Cool for Cats, Up the Junction, you know, all these kind of very British sounding songs. And all of a sudden it was just this, wow, you know, what's this? It was a totally different kind of sound, you know, a totally different vibe altogether. They kind of classed up their sound a bit, I think. They kind of went a bit more American and went a bit more in that direction. So, so, I mean, one of the things that you know, I was going to touch on in this video was this idea of white singers or white bands who consciously model themselves on black artists, and they actually, you know, go to town and actually go, you know, we're going to actually, or I'm going to actually try and do something self-consciously which kind of sounds black. And I guess that does go all the way back to people like Steve Winwood, Steve Marriott, all those people in the 60s, you know. It
does, yeah. I mean, I suppose as we go through, there's pretty much two parts of this. That, you know, the first is those artists where you could almost, you know, for example, you know, Tom Jones, when he first released I'm Not Unusual, not long after that song coming out, he played the Harlem Apollo. And the Harlem Apollo was full, and he got on stage and everybody was like, who's this guy? Yeah. You know, because they'd heard the record on the radio and they thought it was a black guy singing. Yeah. And it was, then he walks out from the audience and he starts singing. It's all fine then. The notes, you know, it's the right guy, and it's the right guy stood up. Yeah. But, you know, that's only part of it. Only, you know, you've also got this element of blue-eyed soul where it's just an influence. Soul music is an influence. It's not somebody trying to sound black. It's not somebody, you know, you can never confuse them for being a black artist. But the influence is there, and I'm sure there's plenty of examples that will come across tonight. But so the next record on the show is this. Now, this is a classic 60s soul album. This came out on Motown. I think this is from about 67. And this is Chris Clark. Now, she was, at this stage, the only white female artist signed to Motown. So this album, came out in 67. She made a follow-up for Motown as well called CC Rider, classic soul record. Now, she never had any hits, so she recorded those two albums and a handful of singles. But she had a relationship with Berry Gordy. So this is the way the story goes, is that in 1967, Florence Ballard left the Supremes. Yeah. Florence Ballard felt that she should have been the lead singer. She had a much better voice, a much stronger voice than Diana Ross. And I think she felt that she should be put up front. Now, the straw that broke the camel's back was the fact that Berry Gordy renamed the band Diana Ross and the Supremes, as opposed to the Supremes. Florence Ballard couldn't cope with that. She walked out. For a brief moment, Berry Gordy was going to replace Florence Ballard with Chris Clark. Apparently, the only reason why that didn't happen was because he was worried about how white America would take to a white singer joining the Supremes. Now, I'm not totally sure that's the only reason, because apparently he was having an affair with Chris Clark at the time when he was dating Diana Ross. So that's, there you go. That's a problem waiting to happen right there, you know. But there you go. But she only made 2 albums for Motown. Yeah. This is a cracking album. An original of this on UK Tamla Motown will set you back more than a turn. This, I think, is an American copy. It cost me about a tenner. But interestingly, I only realised this yesterday. I was having a quick read up on her last night, and after she finished, you know, recording for Motown, she actually went away and wrote the screenplay for Lady Sings the Blues, the Billie Holiday biopic, which starred Diana Ross, and she was She was nominated for an Academy Award as well for that. So quite an interesting career. But this is a classic Blue Eyed Soul record.
Yeah, I've heard you talking about her before, and somewhere I have a couple of tracks by her. I think there was a soul box set that came out many years ago now. I think it was called The In Crowd. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
a big box. I got it from the library, and I just recorded all the stuff onto CDRs. And I'm pretty sure there's a couple of tracks by her on there. So yeah, cool.
So it's just regarding, it's interesting. I shared this record before, and quite a few people picked up on the fact that this includes a track called From Head to Toe, which was covered by Elvis Costello, which I didn't realise. But I know Richard McCook and a few other guys commented on that, and I've since gone back and checked out the Elvis version. It's a cracking version as well, so yeah.
Well, I mean, talking of Elvis, I'm just going to plunge into my pile again now. I mean, you, just before you started talking about that last record, you were talking about artists who they do soul influenced music, but they don't necessarily do it in a way like your Steve Marriott's, your Steve Winwood's. They put their own spin on it. And I guess talking about Costello, we've got this record, Get Happy, which I think came out in, what year was this? It would have been probably 80, 81, something like that.
About that sort of time, innit? Yeah.
And this is a really significant record for them because they'd, a bit like Squeeze, I guess, they were sort of, known for being quite a British, punkish, vaguely punkish type band. But, Costello was such a musical magpie. I mean, he was so into country music. He was kind of so into soul music. And they put this record together, 20 songs on one record. And it's all just kind of, Motown style stuff. And they just put it off so well, but without doing a kind of avert, I'm going to be black. He's just kind of, doing it in his own way.
Yeah.
And also from that era, you got, this is an absolute classic track. This is Graham Parker doing I Want You Back. Have you heard that version?
Yeah, I have, yeah. He's an interesting artist, actually, Graham Parker. I should own more of his stuff. The only album that I've got of his is the Parkerilla.
Right.
Which is the live album, which is I should have pulled it out for tonight because it's a full on straight soul sound, almost in the vibe of the E Street Band. It's got that sort of vibe going on with it as well. But yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I'm sure if Headley was here with us, he would be talking and trying to remind us about the whole pub rock thing. I mean, we're talking about Squeeze, Nick Lowe, Graham Parker. All those bands owed a lot to soul music, and Nick Lowe in particular, and here he is. This record by Nick Lowe is one of the ones that has some very, very overt kind of white soul. It sounds like this kind of all those deep soul things, the kind of Dave Godin series, stuff like Home Wrecker, Only a Fool Breaks His Own Heart. I mean, they're very closely modeled in some ways, aren't they? So but Nick Lowe, he said that the person who had the most influence on his career was this guy, Jim Ford.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
And this is the album Harlan County.
We're getting into the country funk thing. So
there'd be a bit of crossover with the
definitely
have done already. But Harlan County is just one of those great kind of cult white soul funk.
It is.
Country records. I probably just discovered it. I'm guessing it would have been Andy Kershaw probably. Back in And here's the guy here. And Nick Lowe, he actually covered a song by Jim Ford on the record that I just showed. I think it's on this one. 36 High.
Oh right, okay. I didn't realise that. So I've got the Juice of a Call album as well. But the first time I came across Jim Ford was on the Country Funk compilation that came out on Light in the Attic, which is probably, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And that tune is included on it, So, great stuff.
Yeah, I guess that sort of, that pub rock scene. Just going back to Paul Carrack again, he was on the pub rock scene with Ace, Nick Lowe was there with Rock Pile. And there was a definite strong element of white soul in all that. And Graham Parker, I think, is a really interesting artist because I think he was a bit more soul orientated than he's often given credit for. If you listen to the song Between You and Me, which is a Nick Lowe production, now when you hear that record, you don't hear, your ears don't immediately think I'm listening to a soul song, but there's some quality in his voice, some sort of indefinable I don't know, like a kind of sense of yearning, or just he just injects it with something that is recognisably soul with a lowercase s, shall we say?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think somebody in that bracket as well. If I just grab this, and I will come on to actual soul singers in a minute, but
yeah, I will too.
Yeah. But Kevin Rowland. I mean, this particular album, "Searching for the Young Soul Rebels," came out in 1980. I mean, the lead single off it is Gino.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a song, all about Gino Washington. That's the sort of dedicated to him. But I mean, again, it's that thing where Kevin Rowland, obviously, he's from the West Midlands, or Birmingham, Wolverhampton area. He's of Irish heritage. It doesn't matter what he sings. He's never going to sound black, is he?
No.
But him singing this, he's singing in his own voice. That's a big thing for me. So many of today's artists, the current production techniques almost try and make everybody sound the same with auto-tune, etc., compression. Whereas there's no denying that whenever you hear a Dexys Midnight Runners song, it's Kevin Rowland singing. His voice is so unique, it's full of soul. And, on here as well, you've got a cover of 7 Days Too Long by Chuck Wood, which is a classic Northern Soul tune. And I think this album, the whole album has that attitude of Northern Soul. It's soulful, but it's got a punk attitude to it as well. It's a little bit spiky around the edges, and it really works. But, I mean, I often say this in my own videos, that I think Kevin Rowland is a genius. And, somebody with so much focus. I love this record, and definitely a Blue-Eyed Soul record.
I mean, an artist that springs into my mind, just hearing you talking about him, and I decided not to show it, but I'll show it just as a kind of sideline, would be Van Morrison, actually.
Definitely, yeah.
Obviously, Kevin Rowland, famously covered Van. But I pulled this record out because it's one of the albums that Van did in the 80s, where he went down a more kind of new age kind of avenue. And it's not a period of Van Morrison's career which is particularly well regarded. Some people like it, but it's not kind of known as his great rich period. But there's a couple of songs on this record. There's a song called "The Streets Only Know Your Name" on side 2. And if you listen to it, it sounds almost like the Style Council. It's got kind of that kind of classic Rhodes piano on it. And his delivery, you just listen to it and you just think, that is somebody who is totally versed in the soul idiom. And there's stuff on all his albums. If you go back to, Moon Dance and all those records. I mean, he's a fascinating artist. He's a bit like Ray Charles in a way, and he's like he's an artist where you think, God, is this jazz? Is this soul? Is this blues? Actually, it's all of them, isn't it? It's just gradual shift of focus from one to the other, and he slips between them really cleverly.
The album, the Van album that I love is the live album from the mid-70s. It's Too Late to Stop Now. Just that fantastic horn sound that throughout the record. It's as you say, it's just a really soulful record, a great sound.
Cool.
Right now,
grab
one more. Right, so this is I've spoken about this guy recently. This is Robert Palmer.
I thought he would.
You knew he'd come up. His debut album, Sneaking Sally Through the Alley. So Robert Palmer had previously sung with Vinegar Joe, with Elkie Brooks. And he went away as a solo artist and recorded with the Meters of all, I don't know how that came about, but basically you've got this white guy from Yorkshire recording with the New Orleans funk band, the Meters, who at this point had all these great tunes like Sissy Strut and Hand Clapping Song, whatever, so absolutely fantastic. Recording stuff like Sneaky Sally Through the Alley or From a Whisper to a Scream, which were both Alan Toussaint tunes.
Yeah.
So you've got this real New Orleans funk thing going on, fronted by this pasty-faced white boy, basically. And, if you check out some of the stuff, the footage on YouTube from this sort of period of this material, his voice is impeccable, so soulful, just a beautiful. And again, you at no point would you think this guy was black singing, but his delivery is just so soulful, incredible. Yeah. I mean, and he passed away quite young. I think he was in his mid-50s when he died in the early 2000s. And it's interesting looking back now because I've been looking at a lot of footage from that sort of period. And what everybody's saying is that, you know, first of all, he lived life to the full. He liked to drink, and whenever you see him interviewed, he's chain smoking, you know, and it's Marlboro Red, you know, it's the full fat cigarettes he was smoking, you know. But
yeah,
it's amazing that right to the end, he had a great voice despite all that, you know. So he had no right to have the voice that he had at the end. He still had that beautiful, soulful voice.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's somebody that recently I've been playing a hell of a lot.
Cool. Yeah, it's very strange, isn't it? That thing where certain male singers have some quality of the voice. It's just, I don't know what it is. It's like in the larynx. Either that, or they've sung along to those records in their youth so many times. You know, it's a bit like a guitarist, like Eric Clapton will listen to B.B. King over and over again until he can play like B.B. King. I assume that these singers, like, you know, Robert Palmer, Rod Stewart, all these people, they've just sung along. And, you know, like you know, smoked a lot of Marlboro Lights, and
yeah, it's I mean, there's got to be a certain element of almost like muscle memory, hasn't there? You know, you're talking about guitarists and such like, but you can imagine somebody like Rod Stewart having listened to those soul records over and over and over again to come up with that sound, you know.
Well, I can forge a link between that and my next one, actually, because again, this guy was an incredibly hard-living individual. And I'm talking about Rick Danko from the band.
Yeah.
Now, this is the album Moondog Matinee, which was the album of covers that they recorded back in whatever date it was, 1973. Now, Rick Danko is not generally viewed as the most significant vocalist in the band. Usually Richard Manuel hogs all the limelight, and with some justification, because he had the most exquisite voice imaginable, really. Yeah. But I think Rick Danko is quite an underrated vocalist. Like, on the Brown album, he sings the song Unfaithful Servant, which is an absolute highlight of that record. I think on the first album, he sings This Wheel's on Fire.
Right.
You know, which is, again, is an absolute classic. And on this record, he takes the lead on the final track of this record, which is a cover of Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come.
Right, okay.
And, you know, the version does not eclipse Sam Cooke's version, obviously. I mean, this is arguably not the band at their peak. You know, I mean, the band, you know, shot their load quite early on, didn't they, really? But it is an incredible performance, and there's something about Rick Danko. I've always loved his voice as an expression of just who he was. When you listen to his voice and his singing, you just hear someone who is, I mean, it sounds a bit naff, but it's just completely plugged into the source. And when you read the story of the band and how he came from this kind of, you know, rural upbringing in Canada, life on the farm, his two big influences in his life, you know, musically, were Hank Williams and Sam Cooke.
Right. Which
is fascinating when you think about it. And, you know, obviously, you know, all the great stars of country had a lot of soul in their voices, didn't they? I mean, if you listen to Hank Williams, there is soul there. It's not soul like Otis Redding, but there is some quality again. And on this record, like I said, Rick Danko, he seems to just kind of just roll it all up together. You know, Hank Williams, Sam Cooke, why not? Let's just join these two together. You know, very, very organic way. There's nothing contrived about it at all. But again, he was an incredibly hard-living guy. He was a heroin addict, alcoholic, probably. You know. But worth hearing that.
I haven't heard that album. I only know the first three band albums. But you mentioned Unfaithful Servant. There's a real cry in his voice, which, you know, I say that about the best soul singers. Otis had that. Yeah. You know, you really feel what they're saying, and definitely the case with Rick Danko. I know that, you know, the classic album series, the documentary series. There's an episode which covers the music from the Big Pink and the band album, the second album.
Seen it, yeah.
And I think it was recorded in the sort of late 90s, and you've got Rick Danko singing Unfaithful Servant in that documentary, and he still sounds fantastic, and he still has that quality to his voice as well, despite the years of hard living and drug abuse and everything else, you know. So well, I'm gonna pick something more modern. This is probably something you might not know. This is Eli Paperboy Reed and the True Loves, and the album that came out probably about 12 years ago now, called Roll With You. Now, I've said many a times, I have a real problem with modern artists trying to sound like make records that were sounding recorded in the 60s. I hate that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's almost missing the point. Just because something has that analog quality, you know, that they're using all the proper vintage gear, it doesn't make a record good. And the reason for that is it's the performance. It's the reason why those Motown records and Stax records sound so good. The artists were brilliant. The songs were spot on. Just because you've got the right gear doesn't mean that you're going to sound anything like Marvin Gaye. And I think that, from my point of view, if I want to hear something that sounds like it's recorded in the 60s, I might as well listen to Motown or Stax, not some modern band that are trying to sound like that. This is a bit of an exception because, as you can see, he's a white guy. He had a killer band with him. He's made a few albums. This is the only one worth hearing now. I saw him several times around this sort of period. And the difference was he had the tunes. He had a great band, a great energy, similar to Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, that sort of vibe, that classic soul vibe. But he had the songs to back it up. And if you do get a chance, I mean, this is definitely worth checking out. Songs like Doing the Boom Boom, Am I Wasting My Time, The Satisfier, Take My Love With You. Brilliant, brilliant soul songs. And yeah, he did it right. And I think there's been so many artists that haven't done it right. They've just latched onto that classic 60s sound, but there's nothing else to it. Whereas, he felt like the real deal at the time. Subsequently, he signed to a major label and it all went to shit. But that album is great.
Is that a signed copy you've got there?
Yeah, well, I bought it at the gig. Yeah, so he played Birmingham several times, and of course, small venues you get to. I
have heard of him, but I don't know where. It's possible that I've seen somebody showing his records. I mean, it might even have been yourself. But cool. Yeah, I can check that out. Good stuff.
Yeah, very good.
I'm afraid I don't think I have anything modern. I'll just go through my pile. This record, actually, right? I'll show this one. Right. This is about as modern as I get. This is 1990, which to me,
that's pretty modern. That's pretty modern, James.
This is actually quite a recent purchase, and I wanted to talk about it because this is an artist that I increasingly love as time goes on. I've always loved John Martyn ever since I discovered him at university back in 1991, and the album that I discovered him with was a record called Cool Tide, which came out I think it was 91. This is the album from before that one. This comes from 1990. Now I picked this up just last week, and it's fantastic. You'd love it, John. It's got a kind of, it's got a certain sound to it. Early 90s, full of keyboards, digital keyboards. It's got the Rowland D50 all over it. It's just
right. Okay, yeah.
But what's really fascinating about it is that vocally, this is a soul record. I would argue this to anybody. And John Martyn started out as a folk singer, I guess. I mean, he, broadly speaking,
yeah, definitely, yeah.
He came out of that folk circuit. But then as time went on in the 1970s, I would say he probably went a bit more jazzy.
Yeah.
He started doing all that kind of scat singing and really, really interesting things with his voice, starting to make strange sounds with his voice that nobody else had ever made before. But then what happened is he got into the 80s. And I mean, some people say that he lost his way in the 80s. And I would have a certain degree of sympathy with that because I think he did get very into the whole kind of just very polite sounding keyboard heavy music, I guess. But then, like I said, he made a couple of albums in the early 90s, this one and Cool Tide. But this one in particular is really noticeable. He's singing with an American accent.
Right, okay.
So that's the first thing you sort of think, hang on a minute. This is, I mean, clearly, singing with a broad American accent and doing a lot of very explicit kind of soul inflection type stuff, just thinking, well, okay, this is a soul record. I mean, there's a track called Live on Love or Live on Love on side 1. Side 2, Deny This Love. I mean, how soul does that sound? Deny This Love. It just sounds like he's gone, right, I'm gonna do something which has kind of shades of Motown, and it's just fantastic. I just absolutely love it, and just what a genius, again, being able to move folk, jazz.
That's it, yeah. Just being able to go from style to style effortlessly. Yeah.
And if you ever see this record, grab it, because
I think he's one of those artists that along the way has suffered with different production sounds. It's not necessarily a lesson of talent or the level of songwriting, but it's just the fact that times change and sounds change and people's tastes change. Whereas when you look at his body of work, it really is something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, hearing that has made me want to go back now and check out those 80s records again, because I have actually owned most of his 80s records, and I've sort of got, I've got shots of them because I've kind of listened to them and gone, Not sure.
Yeah.
But now I'm hearing these records, I'm thinking, well, if that was his approach up to that point, maybe I should go back and listen to them again, you know.
Yeah, well, I was saying to you, I picked up Grace and Danger quite recently, like the last few months. And I played, when I first bought it, I played that quite a lot, over and over again, because it's a beautiful record. Yeah. I mean, it's quite hard listening at times. It's quite dark, but, you know, the songwriting is impeccable. It's fantastic. Right, my next record. So this is the Average White Band.
Yeah. And
I figured you would come onto the Average White Band because I know that you were obviously been a Macca fan. You were a fan of Hamish Stewart.
I didn't think of them, you know. I genuinely, I totally overlooked them.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, any of their 70s albums fall perfectly into this category. You know, they're all of a high standard. They're all worth picking up. And they're all cheap as well. You know, if you see an Average White Band for less than £5, pick it up because they're all great. But so, you know, I mean, fascinating. The story goes that the Average White Band put out the single Pick Up the Pieces. James Brown heard it and loved it. And somebody then told him that it's by a white band from Scotland. And he was having none of it. He just didn't believe it at all, you know. So, and then, so in the end, the JBs actually recorded an answer version of it. And that they badged themselves as the above average black band. And the track is called Pick Up the Pieces One by One, which is another great funk song. It's not as good as Pick Up the Pieces, but the fact that James Brown and the JBs feel they need to answer this track that they heard by this, you know, pasty-faced Scottish band it really is something, you know. So, but this is my favourite of their 70s albums. This is an album called Soul Searching. It came out in 1976. And in all honesty, if you played this to me without, you know, before I knew what it was, I would have said this was Earth, Wind and Fire. Yeah. You know, it's got that very glossy, very shiny production sound, as funky as you like, but beautiful harmonies. And, you know, I believe that you would think this is this is Earth, Wind and Fire. It's a great record. So I've got a spare copy of this if you haven't, but I'll send it to you. But
I don't have
lovely stuff. Yeah, lovely stuff.
Yeah, I mean, John Lennon famously made a comment about them too. He was interviewed, one of the last interviews he gave, which would have been in about 1980, and they asked him what he was enjoying, you know, what music he was enjoying at the time, and he name checked the Average White Band and said, you know, who'd have thought that a band that soulful would have come out of, was it Dundee?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, really amazing. And that guy, Hamish Stewart, he's a fantastic bass player. Right, I'm going to go with another one now that I listened to today. This is one that I immediately thought of when you decided to pitch this idea to me. I immediately thought of this record, which has been shown a couple of times on the VC. I discovered this in a box of absolute tat in, I think it was my local antiques place, and I thought it looked promising. It's on Atlantic. You know, and it's Maggie Bell, Queen of the Night from 1974. And I mean, if you look on the back of it immediately, you see, right, personnel, Reggie Young was the first name on there. So, you know, he was one of the Memphis Boys. Yeah. Really. And then it, you know, it's produced by Jerry Wexler straight away. So you think, I mean, how she got to team up with him and what actually happened in her career, I don't actually know. But she was from Glasgow. Yeah. She started out, she was in a band with I think it was Alex Harvey. You know, Alex Harvey as in... Yeah, sensational Alex Harvey, yeah. Alex Harvey's younger brother discovered her, and she was in his band for a while, and then he died. He was electrocuted on stage, apparently, and dropped dead. Blimey. So, yeah. That's the way to go, isn't it? Electrocuted on stage. That's grim, isn't it? But she was okay. I mean, at some point down the line, she joined a band, or she formed a band... what are they called? I'll have to flash it. Oh, Stone the Crows. Stone the Crows. Absolutely. Stone the Crows, yeah. There you go. Which have another McCartney connection, because in that band there was Jimmy McCulloch, who later went on to be in Wings. Anyway, I digress. So this record, it's soul, but it's also blues. It's more Etta James and Janis Joplin than it is Aretha, say. Yeah. So she's got a real rasp to her voice, hasn't she? Absolutely. Yeah. You could absolutely strip paint, you know, some of these tracks. Yeah. Just a really interesting track list as well. She's got A Woman Left Lonely on here, which was done by, I think it was Janis. Oh, right. Okay. I think Janis did that one. After Midnight by J.J. Cale is on here. And a fantastic version of the Ringo Starr song, Oh My My, from the Ringo album. Right. Which Great album. Yeah, but not a soul record, really.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Especially when Ringo sings it. No.
But interestingly, it was a co-write, that song, between Richard Starkey and Vinnie Poncia, who,
oh right, okay,
very kind of pop soul, slightly black.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, if you've not heard this record, I mean,
I haven't.
I found this at 50p, and it's just a scorcher from start to finish. It's got upbeat stuff, it's got slow stuff on it, and because you've got people like Reggie Young, blistering guitar, like I said, it does go into blues territory on more than one occasion. It's not straight soul, it's that kind of soul blues thing. But really,
right. Okay, right. Well, I know I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to go for the juggler now. This is I know that you're not a fan of this artist, so I know what's coming. I figured it's time to show some Rod Stewart.
Put it on the shelf here somewhere.
Have you? Yeah. So, see, my point with Rod is that if Rod Stewart had stopped recording after this album in 1974, how would we view his career? Those Wonderful Faces albums, and his first 4 albums are all faultless. They're all, 5-star records. I mean, that's probably the worst album cover in history. That is there, An Old Raincoat Will Never Let You Down. It's basically a man in a mat chasing a child. Right, yeah, so ignoring that, but a great record. We just listen to the music.
Different times, they say, don't
Different times, yeah. Gasoline Alley.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got Every Picture Tells a Story. And then finally, what's this one? Yeah, Never a Dull Moment.
Yeah.
Those 4 albums for me are perfect blue-eyed soul records. He just had a great voice, and it's this thing again where it's not just about. A lot of people talk about artists writing their own material. I'm not for that at all. I don't believe in that at all. If you can write a great song, fair play to you. Yeah. But 99% of artists can't write a great song. It's as simple as that. So Rod Stewart wrote some great songs, and he also, made great interpretations of other people's music as well. I mean, this came out in 1974. The 1970s were a decade of singer-songwriters, wasn't it, really? And, what did we get? We got a lot of whiny singer-songwriters, which, stuff which you never want to hear. But Rod Stewart singing, doing his version of Jimi Hendrix's Angel is absolute perfection. Or what else is on here? You've got his version of I'd Rather Go Blind by, obviously Chicken Shack did it, the original Etta James. Great versions. Rod's is right up there, so I can't fault that at all. And he just pitched it right. I know his career changed, and, he just went down the pop route and sold 250 million albums or whatever he did. But those first 4 albums are perfect. And if he'd have stopped recording then, if he'd been run over by a bus, we'd be saying now that Rod Stewart is a legend, but we don't have that, So unfortunately, he wasn't run over by a bus.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no problem with anything you just said. I mean, I've got all those Rod Stewart albums here on the shelf. I can't be bothered to try and find them, but they're all up on that shelf. I think you sent me 2 of them, to be fair. But
yeah. I do have that habit of forcing Rod Stewart albums on people.
What I thought I might do, because I've got quite a few here, but I think what I'll do is I'll just quickly show a few.
Got him.
Just in one go, almost, because it took ages to get them out of the sleeve, so I'm loath not to show them. But I don't want to spend too long on them. Just want to show some things that I thought were quite interesting. So this sprung to mind immediately. James Carr doing the Dark End of the Street. Now, there are so many versions of that, and I'm really annoyed because I couldn't find any of them. I've got at least 6 albums on my shelf somewhere with black artists doing that song. In fact, I nearly did a whole video on this topic because there are so many versions of it. It sort of turned into one of those songs that you get a bit sick of, really, because so many people have done it. It's a great song, but you just hear it too many times, But the one that I thought of, just for the purposes of this video, obviously, is the Burritos one. And Graham Parsons, I listened last night to his album GP. That album, again, obviously it's a country album, but there is so much soul in his voice. But again, it's that soul with a small s rather than a big S. He's not doing soul inflections, but there's so much there, isn't there? Do you want to jump in?
No, I was just going to say about that song, Do Right Woman, Do Right Man. It's
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, that in itself, Aretha did it.
Yeah.
So I mean, she did a brilliant version of that. And I was just thinking, did Delaney and Bonnie also do a version of that? I'm not sure whether I've got it in front of me, but yeah, I mean, you know, again, that it's funny how particular songs lend themselves to different genres.
Yeah.
You know, so and that's a perfect example where, you know, that fits in a country mold quite easily, but also can be the most soulful record. You know, so Aretha Franklin recording it, it's a perfect soul record. It's just it's interesting how a particular song can fall into.
Yeah.
You know, let It Be Me is another one.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, think of the Everly Brothers doing that, or Glenn Campbell and Bobby Gentry. But then you've also got the Sweet Inspirations doing it as well. A perfect, you know, soulful version of it. It's funny how certain songs can easily fall into
they do
into either genre.
We're talking earlier about Dusty. Mine went blank, and this is a singer who not really as legendary as Dusty.
Yeah,
I mean, she was a pop singer, really. You know, Jackie DeShannon. I mean, her big song "When You Walk in the Room" was covered by the Searchers, so you can see, you know, not exactly a soul thing. But on this comp, you've got the song "Put a Little Love in Your Heart," which was recorded by the Isley Brothers, and it was also recorded by David Ruffin as well. And when you hear her version of it, you know, it's a pop song, really, but you can hear what the soul singers would have heard in it, and you can see why a band like the Isley Brothers would have gone, oh yeah, we can cover that, you know.
Yeah. There's a great reggae version of that song as well, "Put a Little Love in Your Heart" by Marcy Griffiths. Yeah, so it's on I think the third Tighten Up comp. Yeah, brilliant. Great tune.
What I quite like about this topic is how it springs up really sort of just wacky things. Now, I know you've got this because I actually sent you a copy of this.
You did send me a copy of that, yeah.
Who would have thought on this record he does this track called, is it Too Much Time, I think it's called. I mean, you know, Beefheart was just absolutely kind of Ornette Coleman meets Howlin' Wolf, just absolutely off the wall stuff. But on this record, he teamed up with Ted Templeman in order to try and make a record that was going to try and cross him over a little bit. And they just come straight out of the gate with this track that's got kind of Memphis style horns on it, and just him doing this absolutely immaculate sort of Stax style vocal.
Well, you're right. I remember you sent me that record, and I was totally surprised by it. It really was not what I was expecting at all. Yeah, I was half expecting to put it on, put half aside, and rip it off again. You know, but as you say, it has got that Stax feel to it almost. Right, I'm just going to jump in with one of the great blue-eyed soul singers, and that is Darryl Hall. Hall and Oates albums, you know, whether it be that or Abandoned Lunchnet, whatever you want to see. Yeah. But ultimately, all you need for Hall and Oates is a best of.
Right.
That is all you need. And I know that people don't like to talk about best of compilations or whatever, but you know, this best of album that came out, I suppose, in the early 90s is absolutely perfect. You know, She's Gone, Sarah Smile, Rich Girl, Kiss on the List, Every Time You Go Away, Private Eyes, I Can't Go For That, Man Eater, whatever. It's absolutely perfect. And he still has, in his early 70s now, he still has a perfect soul voice.
Yeah.
You know, and he does this thing at the moment where he's live from Darryl's house, and you've seen it on YouTube, where he gets, so, you know, he's got a studio set up in his barn or whatever it is. And, you know, artists come and sing with him and perform with his band. This has been going on for a decade or something now. But you get all the best soul singers coming in, and everybody, you know, he sounds great, whoever he's singing with. So, you know, one that I saw recently, although it might be a few years old now, was Smokey Robinson. Smokey Robinson coming in and singing with Darryl Hall. And, of course, they both sound absolutely fantastic. It's all done live.
Yeah.
Still got a great voice. But these songs, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love these records. Brilliant.
Well, I actually pulled one out myself, but I pulled this one out because I wanted to talk briefly about Todd Rundgren, and because he was from Philadelphia. You know, some of the stuff on Something Anything, I mean, he does really amazing kind of soul style singing on that record. He teamed up with Hall & Oates to make this record, which is a total flop, because they'd sort of built up an audience of you know, blue-eyed soul fans. Todd comes along and he records. Have you heard this record?
I don't have that record now.
Right. Well, it's a kind of like concept album. I describe it as sort of psychedelic rock funk. However, you can't get away from the vocals. The you know, the blue-eyed soul thing is still absolutely in the mix there.
So what year is that, James?
I think it was 1974. I think so, anyway.
Right, okay.
And apparently Todd Rundgren had already been making, you know, records himself. This, I think he made this record around about the time that he formed Utopia. So he was just in the process of kind of heading into his kind of serious, you know, prog mad thing.
Yeah.
But working with Hall & Oates on this record, apparently it really taught him a lot about, you know, how to actually sing like a proper soul artist, because he does sing backup vocals on this record. And the album he made after this, the solo album he made after this, I'm not sure which one it was, the critics picked up on the fact that his vocals had totally, like a massive leap forward, basically. He'd turned into a really amazing sort of, you know, Philly soul singer, essentially. So, yeah.
Because his song, which I suppose was later on in the decade, Can We Still Be Friends?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a soul tune, but that was covered by Robert Palmer on his album Secrets, I think, which came out in about 79.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you know, so you've got I first heard Robert Palmer's version, which again is this beautiful blue-eyed soul version. It's a great vocal on that song. And I was thinking at the time, did he write this? And then you look at the credits, Todd Rundgren, you go back and check his version out, and you can see where it's all come from. So it's all, you know, particularly, you know, so yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. All interlinked. Go Now, the Moody Blues.
Yeah, definitely.
Show it. I mean, one of the first big chart hits that was, you know, based on an old soul tune.
It was. The Bessie Banks original is a beautiful old R&B soul tune.
Yeah.
But that's one of the songs that I remember being a kid actually Go Now. When I was small, I must have been about 5 or 6 years old, to stop me grabbing my older sister's record collection, my parents bought me just an old sort of suitcase record player.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So they got me this, and they didn't have any money. So people from the street donated loads of singles. So I basically must have had, I don't know, about 70, 80 singles, none of them in sleeves. And I think I had 3 copies in that pile of records of Go Now by the Moody Blues. So as a 5-year-old in the mid-70s, I must have played Go Now by the Moody Blues, you know, God knows how many times, but there you go.
Well, I guess, you know, coming from Birmingham yourself, I mean, that song really put Birmingham on the map, didn't it? It must have done back in the day. I mean,
yeah, I'm not sure whether it put us on the map, James, but but yeah, a Birmingham band. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Spencer Davis Group did beat them to it, I think, and there were a couple of other bands that sort of snuck in. But I mean, it was a big #1 hit, wasn't it? I mean,
it was, yeah, big #1 hit, yeah, that's right. But yeah, check out the Bessie Banks original, fantastic.
Oh yeah, absolutely fantastic.
And I just want to quickly mention Eric Burdon. Now, one thing in preparation for this chat, I realised that I don't have any records at all by the Animals at all, you know, so. And it got me thinking about, there's a great clip on YouTube, if you get 5 minutes. It's Eric Burdon, Chris Farlow, and Otis Redding. I think it must be on Ready, Steady, Go. The 3 of them performing on stage together. And you'd automatically think, you know, Otis Redding, he's the guy with the big voice, and the other 2 guys, you know, sort of backing him up. No, they're all full at it, brilliant voices. You know, obviously Chris Farlow still has a great voice now. I saw him supporting Van Morrison about 10 years ago. Big man, great voice. But Eric Burdon, say in the late 60s, early 70s, he left the Animals, of course, and he formed a new band, and it was Eric Burdon and War. Yeah. They made 2 albums together, at which point Eric Burdon went his own way again, and War went on and did their own thing, and all those great albums throughout the 70s. But this is their album from, I think, 1970. And definitely worth checking out. There's a selection of sort of originals and covers, but they do a nice version of Paint It Black. If you want to check out one of their tunes, probably the best tune is their version of Spill the Wine. Eric Burdon and War doing Spill the Wine. A great sort of Latin-tinged blue-eyed soul tune.
Yeah, interesting. Because, of course, I mean, I guess when he first came on the scene, he was a blues singer, really, wasn't he? I mean,
yeah, definitely, yeah.
There's a very narrow little gap between these different genres, but okay, cool. Well, how many more do you want to do, John? I've got a couple of stragglers here. I mean, just want to really quickly mention Edwyn Collins.
Yeah,
as just an example of I mean, Orange Juice covered
Al Green, Love.
Al Green, yeah. And again, I guess he would fall under the category of somebody not overtly singing in a American soul voice, but he's got that indefinable quality again.
See, this is a big thing for me, James. This is, and so these sort of artists, I probably listen to more than what you'd expect as your class as being traditional soul artists. You know, so the likes of mentioned before, Kevin Rowland, Edwyn Collins, Lloyd Cole. Billy Bragg, people that sing in their own voice. You know, they're not soul singers, but there's so much emotion in what they're singing. You know, I'd love to, you know, Edwyn Collins is a perfect example. I'm pretty sure that in his head, he sounds like Al Green.
Yeah.
He doesn't sound like Al Green, but what comes out is something totally unique. You know, he's not trying to sound like, you know, you're never mistaken for somebody else. He's got his own unique sound. And that tune, A Girl Like You, which was massive all over the world, that is a blue-eyed soul tune. It's wonderful. Actually, talking about Magpies, one album that we haven't mentioned, I've only got a CD here, and a very obvious one, is Young Americans by David Bowie. He classed it as plastic soul, but it's definitely blue-eyed soul. And, you know, for me, the title track is his best tune. It doesn't get any better than that. But you know, it finishes with Fame, which is obviously a co-write with Lennon. And James Brown actually nicked that riff for a tune a couple of years later on a track called Hot. So, you know, the fact that James Brown is drawing influence from David Bowie pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? You know, it's definitely a blue-eyed soul record.
Well, there was one artist I just quickly wanted to mention, and I didn't know where he was going to fit in. And but I think he's a really interesting one. So we can maybe finish with this, because this is not an artist, this is Peter Gabriel, someone who's never done a soul record. He's never made a soul record, really. And yet his biggest influence, you know, in his musical life was Otis Redding. He absolutely loved Otis Redding when he was a schoolboy. He sang along to all the Otis records, you know. On this album, you've got his song Salisbury Hill, which is one of his greatest moments, I think. But the quality that in his voice, the track that I always think of is right at the beginning of the second Genesis album, which is the album Trespass, which is the first proper Genesis album, really. And the album starts with him singing a cappella, just, you know, completely on his own, looking for someone. And it is the most spine-chilling kind of soul voice. Just beautiful, just controlled emotion, but that hoarse quality. It's just got that kind of hoarse quality to it, which he always had in his voice. I think far more so than Phil Collins, who tried to go down the Motown route and you know, be a Motown. Yeah. Peter Gabriel, I think, even though he was an art rocker at the end of the day, I do think that what he brought to the Genesis records was this, you know, elusive element, shall we say, which was, you know, basically Otis Redding and his love of Otis.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've never thought of Peter Gabriel as being soulful, but I do love his voice. You are right. You're saying he has got a unique voice, and perhaps it again is that almost throaty, type delivery that he's got. There's one artist which is quite an obvious one, which I haven't shown, which is within this pile of records somewhere. And of course, somebody I should speak about is Michael McDonald. You know, all this isn't a Michael McDonald album, of course.
I was a bit nervous about mentioning him. I thought, is he just a pop singer that kind of?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He is. You know, if you're going to pick, and you know, I said this about Dusty, but you know, a male ultimate soul, blue-eyed soul singer, it's going to be either Darryl Hall. Or Michael McDonald. And now, I mean, Michael McDonald himself, he's recorded 2 albums of Motown tunes. I saw him play live, actually, in the early 2000s when he was doing the first Motown album. And I saw him a second time, actually supporting Al Green in Birmingham. He played the NEC with Al Green, right? This is about 6-7 years ago. The NEC holds 12,000 people. They must have sold 1,500 tickets. It was an absolute embarrassment. It was so poorly marketed. But he came out, you know, opening acts, and just gave it his all. But of course, you look at the reason why I'm showing this album is because of the song "What a Fool Believes,"
fantastic,
which again is, you know, just a perfect blue-eyed soul song. Yeah, covered by Aretha Franklin the following year. She recorded that in 1980. Brilliant voice, brilliant song.
Yeah.
But what you need of Michael McDonald, again, like Darryl Hall, just get his best stuff.
Cool. All right, John. Well, thank you very much for that. That was deeply enlightening. Thanks for watching, everybody. Do let us know if you've got any favourite blue soul tunes. All right, then. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Does strike me we haven't actually talked about Paul Weller and the Style Council, but we did mention it briefly.
I purposely avoided, otherwise I could have been here all night.